We're here to introduce session number 5, local freight deliveries and greenhouse gas impacts. One of the things with respect to this is we hear a lot today about freight deliveries, local freight deliveries with electric vehicles. My Amazon truck is electric, I'm not making any footprint. But when you're delivering freight locally and you're delivering on a roadway that you're backing up traffic, not only in the lane you're delivering, but the oncoming lane, you could be actually causing more carbon emissions with the backup cars than you would be with your one vehicle. So that's what we're going to try to talk about today. So our presenters today are from the DVRPC. Kristen Scudder is the Freight Program Manager at Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission. It's a metropolitan planning agency for Greater Philadelphia, the Greater Philadelphia region. In her role, Kristen works closely with DVRPC member governments, communities, and private sector industries to inform and advance transportation projects that support a safe, more efficient freight system that balances the needs of both people and goods movement. Our second presenter is Sean Greene, also from DVRPC. Sean is the manager of the Office of Freight and Clean Transportation at DVRPC. The goals of the office are to reduce emissions from transportation sources through a variety of strategies while supporting mobility and the efficient movement of goods and services in the region. Sean received his MS in Community and Regional Planning from Temple University and BA in Biology from the University of Delaware. And Sean also chairs, if you're not sure, the DVRPC's Electric Vehicle Strategy team. Thank you. Welcome.
All right, good afternoon, folks. I think we're going to make this fairly informal. So if you have questions, please stop me. And we'll try and answer them as we go. So I'm going to try and set the stage for some of the emissions impacts from transportation in Delaware County. I'm going to tie that a little bit to where some of the health disparities are in the county, and then we're going to really kind of set the table for Kristen to present one of the strategies to reduce these sources of emissions, and then subsequently the impact on the residents of Delaware County. So we're going to try and set, here are some of our issues, and then Kristen's going to actually give you some good ideas on how to reduce those emissions. At the end, we'll talk about some funding sources, and then given time and the nature of the group, if you have any questions about some of our other initiatives, our electric vehicles, or an air quality monitoring study we have going on down along the riverfront, we'd be happy to talk about those too. So, wrong direction. Oh boy. All right, now I'm completely right arrow. All the arrows that I didn't press. Cool. Sorry about that. All right. So, just some background. The Delaware Valley region does not meet the health-based air quality standards for ground level ozone. Previously didn't meet those standards for fine particulate pollution. And Delaware County was the last county in our region to meet those air quality standards for fine particle pollution. The graph on the top there, you see, those are what we call criteria pollutants. Those are the pollutants that impact personal health. And you'll see that nitrogen oxides, which form that ground level ozone, are right about on par from on-road mobile sources, from our transportation sources, our trucks, our cars, and our buses, right about on par with the national average. Another major source of that air pollution in the region, if you take a look at Delaware County, has more than their share of point sources, energy generation, burning trash, industry, those kind of things, right? So when we start looking at the pollution pie, our on-road mobile sources, our point sources are really the two biggest, the majority of criteria or pollutants that impact people's health in our county. And I point to these criteria pollutants because we have good data on criteria pollutants that impact personal health. There are EPA standards for those. A little less data on greenhouse gases but they tend to run together, right? They have the same sources. Industrial sources, energy generation, transportation are also sources of greenhouse gases. You see, back as recently as I think it was 2017, the transportation sector actually became the biggest single source of greenhouse gas emissions across all sectors, energy and all those other sections that we were talking about. Now, the vast majority, almost 60% of those greenhouse gases come from our personal vehicles, light-duty vehicles. But 25% of those on-road mobile emissions for greenhouse gases comes from our goods and freight delivery. Okay, so it's significant. It's not the biggest source, right, from these freight and delivery trucks, but it's significant. All of these emissions have an impact on public health. The map on the left is asthma rates in Delaware County. On the right, it's COPD, right? Both of those are respiratory illnesses. And you'll see that the health burden is borne in our challenged communities, our industrial communities, in the southeastern part of the state. But of course, we all benefit from the goods movement, from the delivery, from the movement of goods and services, from the delivery of Amazon packages to our home, right? So we all share in the benefits of this movement of goods and people, but the health benefit, the health disparities are born in a smaller number of communities. Now, that is not to say that this outdoor background air pollution is the sole cause of these health disparities, right? Health is so complicated. Access to health care, right? Air quality within your home, poverty. All these things contribute to poor health. Background air quality, these emissions aggravate those conditions, make those conditions much, much worse, right? So, and that's why I show it, not to point and say transportation and our goods movement are causing these problems, but they're a piece of the aggravating factors that can make it worse for the people that have to live with these conditions. And so then it becomes our responsibility to say, what can we do to reduce those emissions, the health emissions, also those greenhouse gas emissions, because these are also the folks that are going to be challenged by climate change and flooding and rising sea levels. Okay? So if we take a look at, it's not coincidental that our industrial and freight sources also located, in that part of the county. It's important ports, important warehouse locations, and so that map, I guess it's on the left there, shows the concentration of our freight and port facilities. This area in the black here, I had mentioned we are doing with Pennsylvania DEP and the County Health Department, the County Planning Division, an air quality monitoring study in that area around those concentrated communities along the southeast river, the southeast of the county along the river. To actually try and get an idea of where these emissions impacting those communities are coming from, right? So there's one air quality monitor in the county, and so this grant is going to allow us to put, I think, 30 or 40 just in this study area alone to try and get a better idea of where these emissions are coming from. And this is a map of, hey, where are the trucks in our counties, right? And this isn't a surprise. They're on our major interstates, right? They're major highways, and you see, again, they're concentrated down in the southeast. But those goods and services may originate down in that part, in our ports and our warehouses, but they reach throughout the whole county, right? Into your neighborhood by the time it gets to a delivery truck. We're moving through the county to go to other parts of the state, other states in the Northeast. So what do we do? How do we make it better? How do we reduce the impacts of this sector on our public health and our environment? Just like zoning, just like anything else, everything has its place, right? Banning goods movement is not going to work because it's such an intricate part in every part of our lives. Everything good in our lives, almost everything, originates with a truck, right? It gets delivered to our home on a truck. Everything in our grocery store, right? Our cars, the materials that build our homes. I think the Delaware River Port, somebody told me just last week, 80% of the cocoa that comes into the country comes up the Delaware River, right? So it's such an important, integral part of our life. We need these facilities, but the important thing is let's put them in the right place where we can reduce the impacts on people's lives. So planning is going to reduce greenhouse gases, going to reduce those criteria pollutants. Let's make the way we move these things more efficient, right? Pollution is just simply waste. It's using things inefficiently. the harmful stuff that's left over. That's part of our pollution, right? So let's make it more efficient. Let's plan for the way we want trucks to get in goods delivery from these ports, from these warehouses, to distribution centers at our homes. And then finally, clean vehicles is going to be a piece of that. Whether it's electric or hydrogen, or just frankly newer vehicles that meet new, more stringent standards. Cleaner vehicles is the third part of that stool to help reduce the health disparities, the climate change emissions, the impacts on our people and environment from this important sector. And so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Kristen, and she's going to go through some of the things that the freight community can do to reduce those impacts on our communities and the people in the region.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Sean. So like Sean shared, he went over kind of the air quality impacts that we see in our region and specifically how they're impacting Delaware County. So I wanted to talk about how vehicles, but specifically trucks, can be addressed, some of the impacts that they bring to our communities. How can businesses, how can municipalities start to address some of these externalities? And I'd like to break it into two categories. And the first are really freight deliveries, and the second are our major freight generators, your warehouses, your industrial facilities. So I'll talk kind of about both because they have a different set of strategies to address each. Generally, like Sean kind of just concluded with, being able to address freight first stems from being able to incorporate it into all of our planning practices. Freight is everywhere. It's an integral part of our daily lives. If you wear it, if you eat it, if you've bought it at a store, it has probably traveled on a truck. But the only way that we can better plan for the safety of our communities, the performance of our highway network, is to include freight considerations in the rest of our planning as a comprehensive concept. But specific to freight deliveries. So when I say deliveries, I think we're all imagining the parcel package that we get on our doorstep that Amazon delivers, but I'm really gonna talk about deliveries in terms of retail stores getting deliveries, restaurants getting deliveries, your schools or places of employment getting the supplies they need to run your offices, also e-commerce and deliveries to your residential areas and homes. So it's kind of a wide variety, but it's the last mile. It's the end of a trip where a good gets delivered. And generally across the region, across the nation, we've seen an overall increase in deliveries. Why? We can point to a bunch of different things: general population growth, shifts in employment changes and centers, shifts in residential areas, new construction throughout the region, bringing in more businesses, more jobs, more homes, the general excitement for an increase in e-commerce deliveries. We more and more are relying on deliveries to our home, and we want those faster and faster, more deliveries on the road. And then lastly, COVID had a part to play in accelerating some of these trends. So I think that we would have eventually gotten to the place that we're at, but we've seen kind of a really quick acceleration of all of these trucks and deliveries coming into our communities, making it more important that we address it as soon as possible. On top, here, let me actually go to this slide. So all of those deliveries, they come on a variety of different vehicles, and they're not all equal, and they don't all impact our roadways or our air quality quite the same. So your deliveries to your home might come on a delivery van, might come in a package car, where goods that are going to a retail store or a restaurant might come on a larger straight truck or tractor trailer. And a lot of that has to do with where you are on the supply chain. Especially in the suburbs and in more rural areas, we see larger tractor trailers making deliveries. It's easier for them to navigate. But they run into challenges when they try to deliver to a main street in a suburban area. So that's sometimes why we see trucks that seem out of place in smaller and more narrow corridors. It just kind of depends on the business and supply chain. But that being said, like Sean mentioned earlier, all of these vehicles have a different impact on our air quality. So a light duty truck has about twice, and I think that's like your delivery van here, has about twice the NOx emissions that a standard personal vehicle does, whereas a heavy-duty gas-powered truck has about 4 times the NOx emissions. And when we start talking about our heavy-duty diesel-powered truck, they emit about 20 times the NOx emissions as a personal vehicle. And that's all based on 2020 emission standards. So you can imagine that older vehicles probably have worse impacts and worse emissions than our more recent vehicles do. And the average lifespan of a truck can be up to 30 years. So when we start talking about vehicle replacement especially, it's really important to note that these vehicles can be on our roads for a long time, and replacement can make a really big difference in the level of emissions that they're emitting into our communities. On top of all the trucks that are coming into our communities to make deliveries, I thought it'd be really interesting to point out that we've also seen a really high increase in the number of curbside options that retailers are providing. And as of 2023, more than 50% of the top 1,000 retailers offer curbside pickup. And you might be asking, oh, why is that relevant? A car doesn't seem anywhere comparable to a truck. But we're seeing this to be a more common way, or more and more common way, that people are choosing to pick up their goods. And a lot of times people are sitting in their cars idling while they wait for someone to come and bring their package to their car, however long that takes. If they're picking up on a Main Street area where they're parallel parked, they're in a loading zone, they don't want to park and turn off their car, so they sit there with the car on. If there's not a space to pull over, maybe they're double parked, blocking a lane of traffic. Suddenly we have congestion that's building up around them. All of that can impact, more congestion on the roads and more emissions that ultimately come into the air in our communities. So just another aspect of this increase in deliveries and this change in how we receive our goods to consider. It's not always just about trucks. So some of the best practices that we know can help to improve some of the freight efficiencies and reduce some of these emissions that come from delivery vehicles are listed here. This is not an end-all be-all comprehensive list, and none of these solutions will fit everywhere. So it's kind of a toolkit to choose from and to select depending on what a particular community or location is dealing with. But to kind of go through some of the benefits of these best practices, the first would really be to look at providing adequate off-street loading. Like I mentioned before, if you have a truck or a personal vehicle that is double parking and blocking a travel lane, looking for curb space to pull over to but can't find it, we have trucks circling to find a parking spot or blocking a travel lane, suddenly we have idling, extra emissions, extra drive time. We can try to mitigate that by providing an easy space, a safe space for them to pull over into. General curb management kind of falls in that same category, providing the loading zone, especially in front of businesses that we know receive goods at the curb location, or common pickup points for things like Uber Eats or other delivery type services. Off-hours delivery is a way to kind of stagger congestion on our roads. It's hard for municipalities maybe to influence, but it's something we can encourage businesses to do by getting their deliveries not during peak times of congestion. So the less trucks we have kind of sitting, idling, waiting in congestion, the easier it is for them to get in and out, and the more we free up our road space at the same time. Consolidating deliveries is another great way for us to decrease our footprint. I'm sure we all have gotten very used to the quick deliveries that come, or you place an order for 3 things and they come in 3 separate boxes, 3 different days on your doorstep. Some companies are enabling you to click the box that says, please wait the extra day and deliver all of my goods at the same time. That means that 1 truck is coming to your home instead of 3 trucks to make essentially the same delivery. So that is a small but beneficial way to start making a difference. And at the same time, encouraging things like Amazon lockers or alternative delivery sites offers another option for consolidated delivery by a truck. So instead of stopping at 20 houses in a neighborhood, a truck can make 1 stop, drop off all the packages, and then people in the course of their regular shopping, kind of regular commuting trip patterns, can come and pick up their goods. these all kind of reduce the number of truck trips that are required on our roads. And then lastly, like I talked to earlier, having a healthy mix of different vehicle types where appropriate, smaller vans, larger tractor trailers, considering general complete streets design that allows for that curb space, curb access, truck access. And then lastly, designating truck routes in our communities. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but by identifying which roads we want trucks on and which ones we don't, it makes it a lot easier to plan for investment that helps to make freight movement more efficient, and for loading and unloading to be invested in where it's needed. So I'll give a little bit more detail because this is something that I love to talk about, but when we talk about, complete streets design and trying to incorporate freight into, a street front, here are some of kind of the high-level considerations that many people don't think of that maybe need to be considered. So for example, trucks have a really hard time parallel parking. They're huge. That's not something that they're probably going to comfortably do in a curb front spot. So providing loading at the end of a block where they can easily pull in, safely unload, is an ideal situation for them to actually use the space that's been delegated for them. At the same time, providing a buffer around those zones, one, so that drivers can get goods in and out of trucks. Sometimes we forget that they're moving pretty heavy boxes. They're big and unwieldy, and that takes space. So to safely do that amongst moving traffic, amongst other pedestrians, cyclists, wherever they might be unloading, requires a little extra space and consideration. And then lastly, at the same time, I have a pointer here. I won't try. Sometimes, there's dedicated loading in the middle of a block, but again, a lot of these trucks, especially if they're making deliveries to a store, to a restaurant, they're moving heavy goods and they're normally using a dolly. You can't just hop up the curb with all of that equipment and all of those goods. So having loading ramps at the places where you have designated places for trucks to pull over really helps for drivers to not be traveling down or walking down the travel lane to get to the nearest curb corner. Alleviates safety, alleviates congestion, ultimately another hack in trying to reduce the emissions from our road use. All right, so I'll switch really quickly over to the freight generator side. So we talked about kind of the last mile of freight and goods movement, but we're seeing more and more generators in our region as well. So I'm talking things like warehouses, industrial facilities, ports, manufacturing sites. This is the Delco Logistics Center. It's a new, 775,000 square foot warehouse space that is going to generate a fair amount of truck traffic. And in Philadelphia, this is our DVRPC region, we've seen a significant increase in the number of industrial buildings that have been constructed over the past almost 10 years. And 2023 is actually on par to surpass 2022. So we might have the biggest growth in industrial construction that we've had in a really long time. In 2022, that Delco Logistics Center came online, so that's part of that enormous growth that we saw last year. And while it's expected to taper off a little bit, this is still a significant amount of development. So trying to get ahead of some of these development patterns, trying to be prepared for the proposal that might come to a municipality, to the county, is what we're trying to provide strategies and considerations for, as well as strategies and considerations that can be implemented even after some of these sites already exist, right? Because there are plenty of them already, and they generate a lot of truck traffic. So a couple of the practices that I wanted to highlight include considering truck parking and gate hours for some of these facilities. Again, defining a truck network, implementing wayfinding and signage that helps to direct trucks where we want them to go. And lastly, to encourage electric hookup opportunities, especially for medium-duty vehicles, so providing charging locations and charging access. So for truck parking, I know we were having a discussion before our session started today, but there's a general lack of truck parking in the region, and what tends to happen is if a truck comes to either make or pick up a delivery at one of these larger logistics facilities and they are outside of their designated time window, where do they go? They need a place to wait basically until they can get into a facility. And sometimes facilities have truck parking on site to accommodate that, and sometimes they don't. So ensuring that there is enough parking for trucks to have a place to rest while they are, in the process of making their deliveries near these sites is really important, because if they don't have a place to stop, we tend to find them idling in our neighborhoods, in our communities, parking, driving around, kind of trying to buy their time. So this is an easy way to ensure that trucks are stopped, not idling, truck is turned off when it doesn't need to be running. And so including either incentivizing or including requiring in municipal code that facilities include parking as part of their new development is a strategy for future developments to come, or looking for opportunities to provide missing truck parking where it's already currently needed. Like I mentioned earlier, defining a truck route is really critical to understanding where the freight activity is and deciding where you want it and where you don't. Equally as important to designating the truck routes themselves or designating the restrictions. DVRPC has started to lay out a process that we're trying to slowly implement across the region, or encourage counties and municipalities to look into. That starts with kind of a data evaluation and screening, which we are always happy to help with, but really moves this towards more of a local ownership and local designation process. It's something we feel needs to be locally owned and has community buy-in. But once you have that, you're able to plan again for, where should that investment go that helps to move, goods more efficiently, and where should investment go that puts in extra protections or disincentivizes, truck movements through our neighborhoods. And some of that can be done using wayfinding and signage. So we see a lot of restrictive signage that goes up when we don't want trucks in our communities. And I just wanted to point out another strategy to supplement that is really to put advanced signage. A lot of times trucks will find themselves already making a turn before they see, oh, there's a sign that says I'm not supposed to be here. They're probably not going to reverse and back up in the middle of a turn they're not supposed to be making. So really providing them a sign ahead of time that says you will not be able to turn when you get to the next intersection is really helpful to ensure that the drivers are following the signs that we want them to be following. And then lastly, electric vehicles. For new development sites, now is a prime opportunity to be encouraging, either incentivizing or requiring that new development sites put in the electrical capacity to have hookups for especially medium-duty vehicles. So if new distribution centers with local delivery are planning are looking for sites, encouraging that as a part of municipal code is an option to kind of try to get ahead of that game. But also, incentivizing and requiring it afterward is another strategy. We see electric vehicles coming, especially in the light-duty, medium-duty truck space. Not so much in the heavy truck space, but more of your local delivery vans, your Amazon delivery vans. And so having that hookup capacity so that fleets can start converting will make it easier to incentivize and encourage that conversion. And then lastly, not just for those light and medium duty vehicles, but a lot of heavy refrigerated cargo and heavy duty trucks need electrical connections when they're parked, especially when it's hot or when it's cold, to keep the cab at a comfortable temperature for the driver. If you're carrying refrigerated cargo, to make sure that cargo doesn't go bad. So having capacity for these electrical connections not only can support light and medium duty vehicles, but can really help to make sure that we don't have large tractor trailers idling just so the driver can stay comfortable in their cab for long periods of time. So I'll call Sean back up here and we can kind of conclude with some of the funding opportunities that we are trying to get the word out on, and then maybe any of our other initiatives that we're kicking off on.
Sounds good. So, our Kristen and my office are fairly new. We're less than a year old, where we put together our old air quality programs with the freight program. And we have a common goal. It's not contrary to want cleaner vehicles, cleaner air, and efficient freight deliveries. They are actually the same goal. And so this is an exciting opportunity for me, and I hope for Kristen too, that we can start promoting both of our programs with one common goal of making freight deliveries more efficient, more effective, and that's going to have an impact on clean air. So just soapbox moment. And so how do we do this, right? We have, there are, especially with the bipartisan infrastructure law, the IIJA or whatever we're calling it this week, there are a lot of new opportunities for both clean vehicles, electrification, and efficiencies on our highway and transportation networks. But DVRPC has been running a few of these programs for a good long time. The Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, every third year, DVRPC will have a competitive program to accept applications for this CMAQ program, which will allow for projects that will reduce congestion, improve air quality. This will fund things like signal timing, intersection improvements. We used to be able to do clean vehicles with this funding, but Federal Highway, U.S. Department of Transportation has a Buy America requirement, and unfortunately, you can't buy a heavy-duty diesel vehicle that meets that requirement. So that's a shame. It takes a very effective tool out of our toolbox. Unforeseen consequences. Of course, we want American-made goods and American jobs behind these things, but one of the unforeseen consequences, it makes it kind of hard to fund these vehicles. But every third year we do run this CMAQ program. It's got a long list of eligible activities. Certainly welcome to take a look at those. Under the IIJA, there's a new program, a carbon reduction program. This is aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sources. I believe this is a brand new program. I believe our strategy is going to turn into marrying this funding with the CMAQ program so that when we do calls for competitive CMAQ projects, we'll have some extra money in there and it's got different requirements, and then so we can take a look at which program your project fits better in and give us a little bit a chance to expand the reach of that CMAQ program. So carbon reduction focused on greenhouse gases, but it's got a lot of the same requirements. Planning grants, we call it TCDI, and I like to see it spelled out there because I always forget at least one of those 4 words. Transportation Community Development Initiative, again, I guess that's every other year, Stacy?
Yep.
Yes.
Tracy, Stacy, every other year we'll accept applications for planning grants. Hey, you're getting a new warehouse facility into your community, you need to plan for how to manage those deliveries, how to make that work more effectively. Maybe a Transportation Community Development Initiative grant is a good way to start getting your hands around that, and then those recommendations can lead you into a CMAQ or a carbon reduction competitive project out the other side, right? I'm going to leave it to Kristen to do these next 3 because they're a little more directly related to freight movements.
Yeah, I'll second Sean's comments. I feel like the TCDI program is a great opportunity to start looking into freight concerns for communities. It tends to be a subject that most people don't have a lot of background in, so having the ability to pull in a consultant, do a short study, whether it's at the intersection level, corridor level, neighborhood level, I think that's a prime opportunity, so we've been trying to encourage that. For the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act money, I have 2 different ports grants here. I know we've talked a lot about trucks today. The first is the Port Infrastructure and Development Grants, and that's an annual competitive discretionary grant program that the Maritime Administration administers. It is for large-scale projects. Don't quote me. I want to say the minimum is a $20 million project, so they are bigger projects, and they are often looking for community support and sponsorship in conjunction with port activity for those types of grants. It is annually, and we've had a couple in our region recently. The city of Camden just received a PIDP grant, so it's a great opportunity to go after some larger project money for capital projects. And then the Reduce Truck Pollution at Ports grant is a new grant that the FHWA has just released the NOFO for. They will be administering that, and it is directly related to reducing emissions of trucks at ports. So replacement programs, any efficiencies that can improve port operations, but specifically around trucks. We're looking, I don't know if there's a deadline yet for that grant, but I think a lot of what we've talked about today falls directly into that category.
The deadline for that is the end of June, I feel like, and maybe the end of July, but it's still a couple of months off. I think the other important things about these, like they may have port in their names, but the distribution centers are located in our communities, right? So drayage trucks that go to ports,
yep,
but then come out to distribution centers in our communities, or those smaller kind of vehicles it's an opportunity for them as well.
Or roads that serve as truck routes to your ports through communities are also prime for these port grants. Right. So we say ports, it's really normally less about ships on the water and way more about the infrastructure that goes through communities to support those facilities. And then lastly, the PennDOT Multimodal Fund is eligible for municipalities, counties, businesses, economic development, corporations, both public and private entities can apply to this fund. It's an annual program that looks to help communities with all of their pedestrian, cycling, general multimodal connections. But as a part of that grant, there is also a freight efficiency component. So again, a lot of the topics that we've talked about today relating to air quality, truck efficiency, fall under that grant program. So that's an opportunity to look for projects that help to improve multimodal aspects, including freight. So that's all I have. Sean and I are more than happy to talk more about these grant programs, talk about any of the other work that we're doing. But thank you all for coming out and for listening today.
Does the DVRPC have specific examples of municipal ordinances related to freight, either timing or truck size, or I've been told that Wilmington, again, I didn't research Delaware, so not your region, but I've been told Center of Wilmington has a restriction on freight. And I was also told that specific to Chestnut Street in Philadelphia, there's a timing restriction on freight. Do you have copies of any of you, or do you have these resources?
So for timing specifically, I have not heard about, I guess, what Wilmington has done, but I have not seen a municipal ordinance for the timing of trucks. The Chestnut Street restriction has to do specifically with the loading spaces. So we have seen a lot of trial, that was a pilot that is now kind of a permanent fixture on Chestnut Street in Philadelphia. What they had was a restriction on the timing that trucks could use their loading zones, and what they opened it to was all-day access to trucks for their loading zone. And that pilot actually revealed higher efficiencies, better transit times, better overturn of the loading zone in general. So I would say that was a win and a good example, but I don't know if there was an ordinance behind it because it's still a pilot.
Regulation. Okay. It's a regulation that just says no parking for trucks.
Signage.
Yeah, and so the signage is established by regulation.
Okay.
We do, however, have some examples of municipal ordinances, and if you're interested, you can shoot me an email. I can give you my card. We can talk more about it. But with regards to restriction of warehouse development and how people are defining warehouses to give them a little bit more control over the review process, so it's not just a by right conversion to warehouse development. So that is something that is not quite truck related, but if it's more along kind of the pre-development line, if that's something that would be interesting, we have some resources on that.
I can email you that.
Yeah.
Great.
So my question inquiry is obviously something I talked to your predecessors about. For example, there was a delivery truck on my block. I live on a one-way street. It came out the wrong way on the one-way street because it's easiest to get there. Same way as that I've been charged with posting weight limits and height restrictions for trucks on roadways for a decade. And how often I see trucks get wedged underneath bridges in the city is high. So, which kind of leads me to, like, you put up signs, but, trucks won't necessarily pay attention to the signs. So what was discussed, and I'd like to see if there's any more or encourage more to be done, is more of the GIS aspect of it, to direct trucks in a truck network, as opposed to having them use Google and make sure that these truck restrictions are part of their routing and not just by signs, because you put up speed limit 25, whatever.
It's a lot to probably unpack there, but let me take a stab at it. Yeah, so this has been a common request and something that doesn't exist in full yet. PennDOT does have a GIS layer, and a part of their 511 data program, they have all of the bridge height and weight restrictions documented. And as a driver, you can access that as part of your route navigation. It is limited to state-owned roads. So any roads that are not on the state network are not maintained as a part of that data set. And I think the challenge right now is finding a partner who is willing to combine all of the municipal data sets into one and hold responsibility for those heights being exactly as posted. Hopefully it's something we're working towards, but it does not exist yet. That being said, truck drivers do use different wayfinding apps, and a lot of them have a lot of that information built into them. I have heard, more anecdotally, that if you look at the number of bridge collisions and bridge crashes that happen because a truck gets wedged underneath of them, that more often than not, you will find that it is a rental truck and an unexperienced driver who is driving that vehicle. So a lot of times we see kind of, your U-Haul rentals, your enterprise rentals. Those are the vehicles that are maybe misreading, not quite paying attention. You're used to driving a car and now you're moving and you got stuck somewhere. So I won't say that that's always true, and I won't say that all drivers follow all the signs on the road. But I think more often than not, the small percentage of drivers that maybe either make a mistake or don't follow the rules, we do notice. And I think a lot of drivers are really trying their best to follow posted speed limits, posted signage, posted loading zone locations. To that end, we always recommend that design aspects be included in addition to signage. Signage can only be enforced, but if you add traffic calming measures that help to slow trucks down or better indicate and show what you want drivers to do, makes it a little bit easier and a little bit more intuitive in case a sign is missed along the way.
Yeah, if I could too.
Yep.
Some of the responsibilities on our municipal, county, and DOTs as well. We did a very cheap study in a Delaware County municipality that had a problem with trucks getting stuck under an Amtrak line, to find that the height on the signs were incorrect, because when the streets were being repaved, right? Yeah. So that's part of our complete streets thing that we do. So when you're doing that repaving, it would seem like we should all know this, right? But it needs to be milled, or you need to change the height on the sign, because you could have a driver following those restrictions and they may not be correct.
Well, that's why the PennDOT said you got to subtract 3 inches from the actual height.
Before you sign it, right? So, and then that was a very inexpensive study that we did with an FHWA fellow that went through a local municipality and measured those heights and found that part of the trucks getting scalped was, incorrect signage.